So good afternoon, everybody. I am Jane Wooldridge. I'm the business editor at the Miami Herald, and I am also the visual arts editor, and those two things have a lot more in common than you might think. And one of the things it does is give me the opportunity to have this kind of conversation we're going to have today. So want to introduce you briefly to everybody because you want to hear what they have to say, not about them. You can read that part. And I've noticed that the guys sat together here and the women sat together. Give me a break. Okay, so just giving you a hard time. So way on the end we have Eric, who is with Teads. And we've discovered that several of us sort of hang out in the same neighborhood, so we're going to have a coffee after, and you guys can come or not. And that's terrific. And next we have Victor Garcia, who is with Publicis One. Next we have Alex Villoch, who is actually my boss, but we didn't know that was going to happen when we set this up, and she won't kill me afterwards, I think. And then we have Debra, who, Pogorelsky, did I get that right? Okay, who is marketing lead with PepsiCo. So let's jump in and start with, we're all about digital messaging. I think you figured that out. But we're going to start with the question that people seem to want to ask revoltingly often, and I have a different answer to it probably than any of our panelists. But let's start with Eric and Victor and talk about marketing to generations. Millennials, as we know, are all the buzz, the largest generation ever in the history of the US. However, we boomers, I'm one of those, we still have most of the money. And then you've got this next group coming up, Gen Zers. So how do you, Eric, we'll start with you, how do you advise your clients to deal with generational marketing?
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. So, you know, what we're finding is we're not, at least our clients are not talking about generation marketing anymore. We know consumers today have a very personalized journey to make a transaction, to make an exchange. What we're finding is we're talking to consumers based on their behaviors, based on how they're going to interact with the product, based on what are the steps they're going to take. And generational marketing has become secondary. It's more about maybe the voice the brand has. I'm giving a media perspective, obviously. The voice may be specific to a generation, but what we're finding is digital is allowing us to have more precision than ever. We don't have to make generalizations on generations or cohorts. We could find a lot of different data points, a lot of different reasons why somebody will be receptive to your message that has been bigger than generations. So what we're finding is the shift in data is allowing us to move away from a generational conversation and really talk about what is it that we need to do to get somebody to interact with a brand or with a message or to hopefully make a transaction.
So I'm willing to buy that because I think my 72-year-old husband acts like he's about 14, so that works for me. But then the question becomes, what channels are you using? Because the reality is my 72-year-old husband is using different channels from, you know, the 23-year-old that's part of our family.
I mean, I don't know if you want to say something, but it depends on what you want to do. It depends on the objective of the campaign, and it depends on the objective of the brand. Reach is cheap today. So before we used to have to base channels on how we could get the most reach, how we can get the most frequency, or how we could get our message heard. But in today's reality is it's easy to get reach. It depends on what you want to do and what your objective is. If you're looking for more of an engagement, if you're looking for more of a transaction in e-commerce, that's going to determine a lot what channels you're going to use. And today, a lot of the channels are test and learn. You come in with a certain set of channels, and quickly you're going to know if it's working or not. You're going to make changes. You'll do optimizations, which will shift you to one channel versus the other. It could be Facebook, it could be Google, it could be anywhere you are. And sometimes you need something as just baseline awareness, where you might go into a more mass environment. So I think objectives are really going to determine the channels you use. We don't go in, I personally don't go in saying, well, we're only going to use these channels based on behaviors. because behaviors are one part, but ultimately what we want is a result. And what result we're going to get is going to dictate the channels more than the behavior that a specific consumer may have.
So Eric, why don't you weigh in on this?
I would agree with all that. I would just say mobile, 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 mobile. I run Latin America, so I control much better the numbers south of Miami. We just did a research, and we saw that 70-something% of Mexican people were connected exclusively through mobile. For millennials, it goes up to 98%. It's a no-brainer. The best, 24%, I think, of 18 to 24 years old are not even reachable on TV. So it needs to be on cell phones. And then it's just I think the type of content that they consume is different. And that's where actually people like you have to innovate all the time and be much closer and be following more the trends, etc. But yeah, definitely the channel is mobile, period.
Well, so let's talk a little bit more about that, because mobile is the channel, and yet, I don't know about the rest of you, but my eyes sort of fell out over the weekend, and I just had to turn off all devices. And in fact, there is, statistically speaking, an incredibly growing issue with vision from reading on mobile, yet that is how people are getting their information. So, Alex, let's start with you. How is the Miami Herald and the other newspapers that you work with in McClatchy, how are they dealing with mobile messaging versus other platforms, particularly sitting at a desk looking at a laptop?
So I think that several years ago, we dramatically shifted the way we approach our work every single day. And we started talking about, first of all, it's not only about our content, but it's the platforms on which we're delivering that content. And we understand that we're not only just the content creator, but the content sort of provider in those networks. And so we fundamentally changed to say, regardless of the platform you're on, it has to be a frictionless experience. And then how you deliver in the content then needs to be shaped by the platform that you're looking on it. Our newsrooms today are digital first. We really don't talk, about what's going to be on the front page of tomorrow's newspaper. It is really about what is going on today and the activities by the time of day that we know people turn to either their desktop or their mobile devices. We also said whether, regardless of the mobile device that you're on or your desktop, how are you having that experience and how are you customizing it to what you choose to get. We're also playing in the space of, I laughed about your vision about that also enabling you to choose to have it read to you. You know, we're on Alexa and we can tell Alexa, read us the Miami Herald headlines or the stories. And our Olive edition, which is our digital edition, you can have it read the stories to you. So it is about giving the customer the option. It is no longer about, we telling you how you're going to consume our information. We live in a world where we have so much data today that allows us to know exactly who is coming to us via what platform. Are they a frequent user, a once in a blue moon user? But we have so much information about our 22 million unique visitors to the Miami Herald websites now that allows us to know how do they recirculate, what did they go to, and then we use artificial intelligence off of Chartbeat to tell us feed them more because that will keep them engaged in our platform and in our content. So it's a very different world of how we approach journalism. So professional vetted journalism that is tied very deeply to using technology to make sure that we reach people how they want to be reached in a way that is frictionless for them.
So I know partly because of what she just said and partly because I work there, that what we look to do at the Miami Herald is create journalism, which is not always the same as other kinds of messaging, and we deliver it where people want it to be, but there is some degree of shaping the message in terms of whether it's video content or text content, or Twitter or whatever other methods we're using. But I'm interested to know, Eric, how are you advising your clients in terms of how they might shape messages that would be most easily consumed in mobile?
They need, I'm going to quote Martin Lindstrom, if you want to see animals, skip the zoo, go to the jungle. You need to adapt to mobile. The average attention span for video on mobile is 5 seconds. Okay, so if you try to communicate with a 30 seconds TVC in which the brand is in the last 2 seconds, you know that maybe 5% of people may see that. That's number one. But basically there's another thing about mobile in the same line. We did a focus group a few years ago. We asked people what was their mobile for them, and we had some answers like, it's my third arm, it's my best friend, I couldn't live without it. Now, think about any other object in your day-to-day life. You wouldn't say your toaster is your best friend or your car is your third arm. So that means that all the messages will be completely adapted to mobile. They must be shorter. They must gain the attention at the very first second. If, like Debra, you want to do some branding, the branding must be at the very beginning, and then you need to engage with the people, and then, well, there's another conversation, but you need to generate emotions, etc. But the most important thing is to be short and concise, and understand that you are communicating with the most personal device someone has. The first thing you see in the morning is your mobile. The last thing you see at night is your mobile. You're in your bed, and I mean, it's a very intimate device, so you need to take that in consideration.
I think everybody knows that earlier this year, Facebook changed the way it delivers content and prioritizes content. And as a result, it has, I think, become less relevant for some brands, not all brands. And Debra, I want to ask you, how has the Facebook change played out for your company? Did you all consider Facebook as an important delivery system? Do you still? How have you viewed this?
I think everyone touched upon key items here, right? So the importance of social media, how the industry has changed from mass marketing to more of a personalized approach, and the data and finding the consumers. So our focus with our brands is really to understand where the consumer is, how they are consuming the media, and to put out there content that's relevant to them, that's going to be shown when they're most receptive to it. And what we're finally trying to accomplish is this sense of loyalty, to have them become brand ambassadors, right? If you look at the impact of internet and access, especially in Latin America, which is my area where I'm focused, over half the population are online. Over almost half of that are on social media, and to Eric's point, 93% are mobile, right? So as long as you're talking to them when they're there, you're understanding your audience, right? If we look, for example, at one of our brands, Gatorade, no examples work to project ideas. We want to talk to soccer players, young soccer players, for example, right? And it's really interesting to see how not all of them want to be a professional player. Maybe some of them just play with their friends, or they're more rebellious and they don't even play. So each piece of content, it has to be modified to exactly what they're consuming, how they're consuming it, make sure that the brand comes in at the right moment, that your content is framed for mobile, that it's long enough for that platform. So it really depends, right?
So if there's different changes in social media, and I'm thinking about, I was recently at a travel conference, and travel brands were saying that they're sort of fed up with the whole influencer scenario, because they're not sure that at least some of these influencers are really that influential. Talk to us, Victor, about what are you seeing in terms of social media? Does it still have the impact? Is it still Facebook? Is it so many different channels that you, as you were saying, you're really looking at it channel by channel, market by market. What's the play here?
I mean, I think social media and Facebook obviously have a tremendous role for most brands, not in the traditional sense of having likes or having, just looking at engagement or looking at, soft signals that make you or allow you to determine if your message is right. It's still a huge audience. It's an opportunity for brands, as Debra was speaking, to connect with consumers with the right content at the right time, at the right moment of receptivity. It's gonna be to stay. I think what's gonna happen is consumers are now finding other avenues of social becoming more visual, social becoming more personalized. I think right now brands went into Facebook and went into a lot of social platforms with a kind of very mass reach, very appeal to all, hear my brand message. And what consumers want is a little bit, or what the audience wants is a little bit different. They want something more personalized. They want one-to-one. They want to be spoken to. That's why influencers have been so popular. But obviously, as you democratize stardom, you're going to get a lot of white noise, and that's what's happening now. You have a lot of noise with influencers doesn't mean that just having your brand associated to an influencer is going to automatically generate the results that you're looking for.
Okay, let's talk about fake news. Alex and I work in a world where we actually believe in verified news. We do think that still exists. So I'm going to put my own boss on the pedestal here, or on the hot plate. How is fake news affecting the legacy media industry?
So I'm going to take this question because I know no one on this stage will jump at it, right? I think I would start with saying that this whole concept of fake news is dramatically challenging what we do every day and forcing us, I think, to go back to establish the fact that saying that we're part of media is a very broad statement. And as professional vetted journalists that come out of the newsrooms in particular, we play within this media landscape, but we have a certain set of values and a mission that stands us apart from a lot of the different players that are out there calling themselves media. And so traditional legacy media, because I think that we're a 161-year-old startup, and we act that way, is the fact that we have this huge commitment to this public service of educating, informing, engaging our communities, and working together to create a dialogue in our communities that moves our communities forwards in a positive way. And that almost makes us operate almost like with the values of a nonprofit in a for-profit world. And so there comes the challenge today of where I believe this hashtag fake news has become proxy for what before we would respectfully say, I disagree with you. And now, instead of saying I disagree with you, it's just easier to say, it's fake news. So I would point for you, there was a very interesting study done earlier this year. It was published in March by the Knight Foundation. It is on their website, and it's called Trust Media and Democracy. And it really looked across the entire United States and saying, what is happening today? Because today consumers have more information than ever before, yet people are more confused than ever before about what is true or not true. And I don't want to use the word fake, but almost anybody today, because of technology, can go out and say anything. It doesn't make it real. It doesn't make it verified. It doesn't make it a professional vetted product like the content that we produce every day, where we realize that if we do something that is not checked and correct and factually based, we could be destroying somebody's business, somebody's life, somebody's marriage. I mean, we take that responsibility very seriously about what we're putting out in terms of our content. And it's something that the brands that advertise with us really value to be by and next to that sort of vetted professional journalism and content. And so there's a tremendous value, and I call it sort of like the good housekeeping seal of approval of what we produce. But how do we differentiate ourselves in a world where, particularly in the US today, depending on your political stance, and I'll go back to that same study that the Knight Foundation did with Gallup, where it was found, one of the key takeaways was that 40% of people who identified themselves as a Republican, when confronted with things that they knew to be true, if it did not align with their values, would label them fake news. They acknowledged that it was true, but they were calling it fake news. And that's where I've now come to that realization that fake news is proxy for, I just disagree with you. And so if we start that way, it allows me to have a conversation. I always say, I talk to our readers almost on a daily basis, where readers will write and say, is this true or not? People are really confused. So we're working a lot with our partners at Google and at Facebook, because they're a huge delivery of our content and of our reach through social media, of making sure that people understand that when they're reading something that's coming across those social media platforms, it is verified, it is, real. You can disagree with it, and I think we need to do as media also a much better job of differentiating what are facts, factual-based reporting, versus opinion. Because so much of what's being called media today in news is really opinion. And opinion's made to be sort of controversial, to be thought-provoking, but it is opinion. It should be based on original fact, but it is opinion. So I think we need to do a better job of labeling that, and we really do strive every day to differentiate that on our websites and in print. But those are some of the ways of, trying to help consumers today understand the differences of what's being presented and being sort of overwhelming folks with content.
Jump in, Eric.
Yeah, on that, I think you have to differentiate, as you say. There's the fake news, which means I don't agree, or you don't agree with me, that's fake. That's the big pumpkin in chief, or however you want to call him. It's for the day, it's Halloween. Or there's also the real fake news, like people deliberately, or people or bots or countries deliberately diffusing fake information and influencing. I think it's good and bad. I think it's actually good for people like you. I think it's very bad for the world. Actually, the founder of the internet named fake news as one of the 3 largest issues of the internet, together with the loss of privacy and the lack of transparency of political communications online. But I think it's good for people like you. We did a research last year. We interviewed 16,000 people, not a 20 people focus group, 16,000 people on 8 countries, including the US, Brazil, and Mexico for mine. And 75% of the respondents said that they would go back to, they would look for news on real sites, on credible sources. So I think it's a very bad thing for the world, but I think it's a really good thing for the quality newspapers and the quality content, because right now, maybe there's not many people from advertising, but the advertising business is basically owned by the duopoly, Google and Facebook. And if you take the numbers, last year in the world, online advertising grew 30%, which is awesome. If you remove Facebook and Google, it decreased 3%, so it's a disaster. And it's very, very important that publishers that generate proper content, whether you like it or not, can go back in the game. I think that's very, very important. And I think the phenomenon of fake news, because people don't like to be considered as idiots. That also, we've been checking that, and you don't like to be fooled. So I think people are going to come back to you guys to get real information. So again, it's very bad, but not that bad for you, I think.
Well, we'll hope so. So when I think back, though, and we've all been following the credibility studies for a really long time, long before the buzzword of fake news, there had been a diminished trust in brands of all sort, whether it's media brands or well-known brands of all kinds. And I'm going to go, Victor, to you, and then come back to Debra on this topic, because you both deal with brands that are, yours is certainly well-known and credible. You deal with a lot of credible and well-known brands. How has this sort of pushback about what is credible, what isn't, and general trust issues, how's that affecting you, and how do you create trust with the consumer?
I mean, that's a loaded question. I mean, you know, going back, everything we've been talking about, the lack of impact that influencers are having, the lack of impact that just having social media is having on brands, it all comes down to the root of people just don't believe what they see anymore. You question everything. And brands need to get closer to consumers. Brands need to get closer to the conversations. Brands cannot speak to all and then expect the conversation back to be one-to-one. They have to speak to one and have it reciprocated back to one. I think the closer you could get to your consumer, the closer you're going to be to establishing trust. That's why brands who go direct to consumer are having more success in establishing greater connections with their base, with their consumer, than brands that have to sell through channels.
So does that mean that advertising doesn't work anymore?
Of course it works. Advertising has a place to work, but advertising cannot be about just awareness. Advertising is more. It's the collective of everything you do. It's the awareness. It's the specific, stuff you do with Teads if you want to be in the right message. It's the stuff you do on Facebook. It's your CRM program. It's the way you're connecting your data to get to that one-to-one personalized message. It's the way you use creative management platforms to give them that specific message with everything, with what's going to give you the results you want. It's not that it's not going to work. It's just different. It's no longer an awareness and a reach game. It's no longer let me just put some pretty stuff out there on Facebook or on Instagram and think that it's just going to be engaging enough, I guess.
Debra, your brand is obviously well-known, well-established. Do you still try to reach out in that engagement kind of way? Have you felt a pushback against established brands like yours, or is it the same bucket everybody else is of trying to constantly reinforce relationship?
Yeah, it goes back to everything that they were saying. I mean, I fall in the millennial category. I'm not cool anymore. Now it's Gen Z, so I'm all news. But what you really want is a brand that inspires you, right? If you look at our consumption patterns and what we buy, you want to have that relationship we were talking about, right? So I'm really happy to be part of an organization that allows me to add value into the world, right? For example, going back to examples, we're going into the 4th edition of a tournament called Gatorade 5v5, which started in Latin America with only 8 markets, where we had teams of kids going to play, and the finalists could go off to Europe, play a final, and get to go to the Champions League finals. First year, we had 8 markets. Second year, it went global. On this 4th edition, we have over 20 teams for guys, and last year, we kicked off a tournament for girls. And, me growing up, I wanted to play soccer. I'm Argentinian. That was impossible. I would have to take 2 buses or no one could drive me. So that's really what we're trying to put out there, right? Like, you're trying to create inspiration, positive change in the world, right? And that's what makes me proud of being part of a company where I can, use my inspiration and use this to empower other people, right?
So inspiration, which is something I hear a lot of brands talking about, and not just talking about, but actively engaging in. As
you have to walk the talk, right?
Yeah, and I think that's something that we're seeing more of, and personally I like. I want to hear more than chatting. But it brings us to a different point that Eric brought up this morning, which is a little bit of the flip side of being inspired, and that's being turned off. There was a study that we were talking about that says basically that brands now have to be very concerned about being placed alongside what consumers view as negative content, generally unsafe content, such as a school shooting, brand-averse content, such as an ad next to an article about a airline forcibly removing a passenger. I think we all know what that was. And vertical averse content, such as a soda ad in front of content about diabetes. Talk to us more about this. I mean, how do you then deal with your clients in an age where really so much advertising or programmatic digital buys, where you're not picking placement, you're just picking volume? How do you deal with this? Is this going to become a consideration away from programmatic buys?
In our case, we read the articles. I don't want to go too much into details, but every time we receive an ad call from a publisher, like you guys, we read the page before it arrives. So, and based on the content of the page, we will decide in 0.00002 seconds whether or not we want to deliver an ad. But it's a massive deal.
Are you doing that with AI?
Yeah, we do that with AI. In that case, actually, going to that, we go with a company called Grapeshot, and on which we built, on top of their technology, our own AI, because we use it for other purpose. But the very important thing is, IPG just released, actually last week, a report on the impact of ads placed next to non-safe content. And it was insane. The brand quality perception would go down 7x, 700%, if the ad is next to a bad content. The people are associating the brand with the content they run on, like they really do. There's tons of insights, but the purchase intent goes down 2 times. When you are in bad content, so it's a big issue right now, and it's actually challenging a lot. Again, the 2 big platforms. It's awful to say that, but nobody is going to kill anyone live on the Miami Herald. Nobody is going to commit suicide live on Miami Herald, and the Miami Herald doesn't upload 400 hours of video content every minute like YouTube, so the Miami Herald can actually filter. And that's why right now brands and large brands are questioning a lot whether or not their ads are being delivered in a safe environment, and it's fundamental.
Alex, did you want to jump in?
I mean, we as a publisher, we have a very intimate relationship with our advertisers and our clients. So we are also, when we are breaking news that we think is of the nature that we are representing that brand, we will pull their advertising. I mean, the shooting comes up and we are actively pulling advertising down because we understand that that brand wouldn't want to be associated with that. Many times, we have a visitor here on stage,
That's interesting.
is that sometimes it's after the fact. We'll tell them we've just pulled this because it's breaking, it's fast, and it's going up so quickly. And that kind of a relationship, I think, is part of the value of going back to that intimacy of knowing our client and their needs and how seriously they take their brand value about being associated with something that they might perceive as negative.
So let's move to the topic, which was the buzzword of last year, but I think still is certainly a relevant conversation around content marketing. And it used to be that publications like ours created a lot of different kinds of news you could use and feature content that in a different age, we are more focused on news and investigative journalism, and we don't always create that kind of content anymore. And lo and behold, this is a personal beef, guys. All you people who didn't buy ads when we were writing that content, now you're finding you have to create that content. So my question is going to be to a couple of you. What role is content marketing playing in your strategy? And Victor, let's start with you.
I mean, it definitely has a role. We see brands engaging at very different levels. It's a big commitment on their end.
Yep.
It's not something.
Now you know how hard what we do.
It is. It's hard. It's hard work. And if you're going to engage, you have to do it right. So we find various opportunities for clients. The opportunities are there. How well they can execute it, it varies from categories, from the type of content that's being created. But it's still gonna be around. It's gonna be something that's gonna continue to be part of a marketing strategy for clients. I think in some categories it'll be more prevalent than in others. I don't know if you have anybody has any specific.
Debra, are you all using content marketing at all, or is that a space that you've stayed away from at PepsiCo?
If you're referring to written content, it really depends on the brand and the objective, right, and where your audience is at. So for example, we have some brands that they're directly related to creating that association with the moment of food, right, like consumption, having dinner together, right? So it would be a no-brainer to be associated with recipes, for example, right? So in the end, again, it goes back to what are you trying to accomplish and what is your business objective?
Alex, I know that the McClatchy company has a content marketing team. Talked to them a couple of times. What kind of role is that playing in that in the McClatchy publishing strategy and other legacy media companies?
So I'll put on my business hat and really talking about the relationship we have with customers that approach us and say, help us. And today we bring to the table multiple strategies because it is not about one size fits all kind of thing. So it's a very customized opportunity that we bring in saying, look, at the end of the day, we are storytellers. We're really, really good storytellers. And so we help many of our customers today tell their story by creating content in a way that is consistent with our values and their brand to be housed on our platforms. In many cases, it's video, it's creating content for their websites in many cases as well as our websites. In some instances, is working with them to create events where you're interacting, people to people, but you are creating content by creating that event, and also out of that comes video content as well that you can propel. So we work, it's very customized. What we do is working with both agencies and customers directly about creating and using content as a way of telling their story in a way that connects with their customers.
We have a couple of questions from the audience, which I can almost read with my new glasses on this screen up here. One of them I think we've talked about social media influencers. The other is how are you measuring effectiveness of Facebook and other social media programs? And Victor, we'll turn to you for that.
I mean, it depends on the brand. It depends on the KPI. Effectiveness could be, anything. What is a conversion for a client? They're all very different. I'm sure for some brands, it's just getting to a particular place. For other brands, it's actually closing on a transaction. So when we talk about effectiveness on Facebook, and there's some brands, obviously, that just use it for pure reach. That hasn't gone away. But if we want to talk about effectiveness beyond reach and engagement, really what you're looking for depends on the KPI that the brand has. Some brands have the opportunity to go very deep into the conversion funnel, and some have to stop very quickly because they can't fulfill that through any digital platform.
So we've only got a few seconds left, so we're going to do a lightning round, panelists. And Debra, we'll start with you. What trends do you see being most influential in the near future in terms of digital messaging? Is it AI? Is it AR? Is it more social media? What do you think?
I love this one. My dad used to give me books from Isaac Asimov, which is sci-fi. So anything that's AR, AI, it's definitely growing. This is becoming a $95 billion industry. There's tech giants that are investing in it. You're going from just consuming content to being part of the content. I don't know if any of you have experienced VR. You're in it. It's really incredible. So definitely growing. Then the other trend that to me it hits a spot, it's everything that has to do with women having more of an executive roles. Definitely when it comes into the technology aspect, I'm really thankful. I work for an organization that allowed me to co-found my own organization, Bridges Unite, that accelerates the professional development of women. So I think every company should take a role in that. Support women, minorities, and maybe connect the dots. Both
Sounds
of them,
good.
Right?
Alex, quick answer. What do you see as being the most influential trend going forward?
I think it's going to be the very rapid continuation of this creating, from our perspective, a very intimate one-on-one customer experience where we are, where the user has the ability to customize and for us to deliver a very, very personalized experience. Everything from the ads, not only the ads that they're served and how they pick, because we will very quickly be able to go from, do you want a lot of ads and pay very little for your content, or do you want to pay a premium and get no ads? And we're moving in that direction of really customizing what you want to receive at an even greater degree than where we're at today. And AI plays into it, augmented reality, but to me, it's that individualization, that personalization that I think can continue to grow.
Victor?
Machine learning, for sure, AI. It's going to change the way we talk, the way brands connect with consumers, the way we reach them, the way we personalize. It's going to change everything. At least we're seeing it play a major role and a bigger role in everything we're doing across the board in marketing.
Eric?
I hate being the last one. No, but I'm with all of you guys, but I think AI is like big data 5 years ago, no? Everybody spoke about that. It was a buzzword. No one really knew what it was, and no one was using it for sure. We live with AI. Everything we do with AI, and it's everywhere. And in terms of advertising, which is what we do, to me, the biggest thing that it allows us to do is to be extremely personal and at scale. Usually, you had to choose either to run a campaign super broad or super targeted. And using AI, you can do both at the same time. And that's amazing. I think that's what's going to grow.
Terrific. Thank you very much to all our panelists.